Welcome everyone, Magnus here, and if you'd like to talk about cameras specifically for video, for mirrorless or DSLR cameras, definitely consider subscribing. And today we're talking about my decision. I was in line, I was excited, I wanted to purchase the Nikon ZR. Now the Nikon ZR is one of those cameras that really had what I wanted. Now if you don't know, I absolutely love recording video in RAW format. You see, photographers today, they edit photos in RAW format, mostly. Some do like JPEG, but many prefer RAW because that type of video format gives you the uncompressed capability of editing your white balance, of editing your exposure in post, and it gives you that extra little bit of dynamic range. So when that format is introduced to video, that's a whole nother territory that we're actually living in. And now there are different types of RAW formats, but the ones who created it all was the Red Company, which was purchased by Nikon. So Nikon's got that default original RAW codec format called Red RAW. And other camera manufacturers have been able to use a form of RAW, albeit they do it their own particular way, and then you can use their specific colors. Like Canon's got their own RAW, you got Blackmagic with their own RAW, and then Nikon's got their own RAW that was separate from Red in itself. Sony doesn't do any internal uncompressed RAW format, but Atomos is one company that with their monitor is able to record ProRes RAW, which is owned by Apple, or other types of RAW are capable with, for example, the Blackmagic Video Assist with their Blackmagic RAW off of the Nikon and I believe Sony cameras potentially. But RAW is a thing. RAW video is a thing, and it's something that the manufacturers have, but everyone has their own color science. And some of the best color science cameras, especially on the high-end perspective, are from Alexa and are from Red. And after acquiring Red, Nikon was like, you know what? We're going to incorporate that in our mirrorless cameras. And the first camera to actually be able to do that at an affordable price is the Nikon ZR, which is a camera that I was so excited about. I think that this is a camera that I paid attention to and I really wanted, because I wanted that filmic, really hard to describe experience of seeing those videos being recorded and saying, hey, I recorded that, and it really looks like cinematic footage that is really hard to explain. Let's be honest, it's hard to explain how something looks incredibly beautiful in a cinematic perspective versus something that looks like, okay, you recorded it with a video camera. This is why I was interested in the Nikon ZR, and at the price point that it has, and me having the budget to actually purchase it, what made me choose not to purchase it? Well, I'm gonna pretty much tell you off the bat, I've got a ton of different camera systems. I am in the Lumix camera system, I am in the Canon camera system, I'm in the Blackmagic camera system. So with Nikon having that special RAW that's known as Red, with that color science, it attracted me towards getting the Nikon ZR. But what made me think of not doing it? Well, first of all, like I said, I have a ton of different camera systems: Lumix, Samsung, Canon, Blackmagic, as I've mentioned before. I thought to myself, is there any one of those camera systems that makes me feel like I've got really good quality footage? And I've got to say that out of all my different camera systems that I own, the Blackmagic cameras themselves really make me feel like I've recorded something of high quality. Now, there has been a limit to the functionality or the ease of functionality that I've been able to get off of my Blackmagic cameras that limit me on certain projects where I'll choose a different camera instead of the Blackmagic to be able to record. Now, those problems have gone away over time, but there were still some challenges. First, let's compare the Nikon ZR to, let's just choose for this example, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame. Now first, let's talk about the screen. Now, everybody knows that the Nikon ZR has got an amazing 4-inch screen that is bright, it's beautiful, and everyone's raving about. Like, it's so big, and it really lets you feel like you don't need an external monitor. Now, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K has a 5-inch screen. Now, that in itself already outdoes the Nikon ZR. But the Nikon ZR does have an advantage in the fact that you can flip out the screen so that you can see yourself when you're recording yourself. That's great. Is it a game changer for me though, or a necessity? No, because a flip screen tends to be a little bit too distracting for me, because I'll tend to look at the flip screen rather than the lens when it comes to recording in that type of mode when I'm doing one of these things, one of these videos that I'm doing right now. And second of all, when I'm actually behind the camera, I'm going to have it the way it's positioned anyway, and having a much larger screen makes it a lot better. And the fact that you can actually have focus peaking, zebras, false color, all of these things on the Blackmagic, because it's a cinema camera, versus the Nikon ZR where you can't have focus peaking at the same time as false color, that could be a problem. Not that I really care too much about that, but from a screen perspective, I already got a screen. Then the other reason is autofocus. Now, when comparing autofocus, I do believe Nikon has got this little edge, but ever since the beta releases of the Blackmagic, where you actually have dual pixel autofocus working, and I've used it on several projects in different formats, again, not as advanced as many of the other manufacturers that I have, but still good enough to use on a professional shoot and not really worry too much about the focus in itself. I think, at least from that standpoint, the Nikon's got a 1-up. Now let's talk about in-body image stabilization, which is something that the Nikon ZR has that the Blackmagic doesn't. Now, there are pros and cons to both, and a lot of, let's say a lot of cinematographers will tell you that no IBIS is better because then you have total control of the stabilization when you want it, and it avoids different types of problems that you might face if you do have in-body image stabilization. But then the Nikon's got the advantage because it actually has in-body image stabilization, where you don't have a gimbal or don't have any type of other stabilization rig, you can still get away with something. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Cinema Camera 6K doesn't have an option. For example, I was on a shoot recently and I didn't have any gimbal or any stabilization with me, but I did have an optical image stabilized lens. And that lens with image stabilization was basically a perfect replacement for in-body image stabilization, and I was able to get a lot of stable shots just by using this particular lens. So there is the ability to get stabilized video even if you're not using a gimbal. Is it worth buying a whole new camera just for the ability to do that, or maybe just getting a lens or using my gimbal with the camera, right? Then you have things like, for example, open game, and the Cinema Camera 6K already does it. So am I really missing anything? No. But one of the final decision makers that led me to move me to just being happy with the Cinema Camera 6K full frame that I already own is the fact that the huge file sizes of the RED files, because there's no advanced compression format, at least for that style, is a problem for a lot of creators and people who use that camera. You're going to get amazing footage, but at a cost of hard drive space. And with the price of hard drive space nowadays, it's a really tough gamble. Whereas with the Cinema Camera 6K full frame, there are different number of compression formats that you can use. So having the ability to record RAW in a fashion that I like and being able to compress it is great. So I didn't buy the Nikon ZR. So what did I opt for, if anything? Because I did have budget. I decided to get an anamorphic lens because I noticed that I'm recording 4:3 open gate format, but I was thinking, what if I recorded open gate but was able to use a 16:9 format that large? That means I'm getting larger than full frame video because I'm using lenses that can actually absorb more light, and that you get with anamorphic lenses because it's directing that light from extreme portions of the sensor and squeezing it in to that 3:2 sensor. So I was able to get off of this anamorphic lens that I bought 1.8 autofocus, larger than full frame format for video, and that to me is amazing. And I get these nice little light flares that are blue because I bought the blue version. And the other thing that I got is the RS4 Pro gimbal, so that I can actually have the steady footage that I want with my Blackmagic camera and support 10 pounds because it's a pretty heavy camera. So I put all of that together and I'm getting better looking footage on the Blackmagic camera than I could possibly get off of the Nikon ZR camera. Not because that codec wouldn't give me incredible looking footage, but by pushing myself to actually use the Blackmagic footage, which already looks beautiful, I can get incredible looking footage. And I didn't want to feel that buyer's remorse that I thought I would feel when spending that money towards that. And I do not have buyer's remorse by buying the gimbal, buying the anamorphic lens. And then I start to think, why would I get the Nikon ZR with its battery compartment, having its micro SD and CF Express card slot in the bottom, all in the same place, with extremely large file formats and other compromises? All of those difficulties, it didn't seem worth it to me to spend that much money and not have the advantages that I do now. But the one thing I wish it can do, because it should have the capability of doing it, is the fact that it could do 32-bit recording. Can I do 32-bit recording? Yeah, I'm doing it now. I'm doing it, but I'm using an external recorder in order to do that. And 32-bit recording is what I wish I could have. That's like RAW for audio, in my personal opinion. But the fact that I can still do it anyway means, like, what do I need the Nikon ZR for? So this is my new camera monstrosity. Though large when compared to the compactness of the Nikon ZR, and that in itself is its own advantage, I still appreciate having this camera build and being able to use it, because quite honestly, when it comes to compact cameras and being able to take them around, I still have the Canon R5 Mark II, and it works just fine for raw video recording. But when I'm on a professional shoot, why should I care about the size of the camera? I care about the quality I'm able to get out of it, and the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame still gives me that. Anyway, those are just my thoughts, and obviously they're subjective, but let me know what you guys think. Did I make the right decision in buying that lens and the gimbal in place of purchasing a Nikon ZR? Also, I did pick up the 45mm f1.2 Canon lens, which is incredible as well, and I have no regrets of doing that, and I'm glad I didn't get the Nikon ZR. But would you be in the same camp? Let me know in your comments down below. And as always, like, share, and you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later. Bye.